All right, ladies, gents, wonderful fitness, health professionals. We're going to be going into day 2 of a 3-day masterclass series. So day 1 for all of you guys who registered outside of CanFit was actually done at CanFit Pro. CanFit did allow me to send out the recording of that. The recording is not great. I will give you guys a full heads up. But if you want to catch up on day 1, just let me know. Send me over an email if you're watching this recording, and then I'll send you the recording for that, as well as I will send you the slide deck as well too. So for those of you who are hopping in for the very first time and you don't know what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be talking about from content to consultation. So this is going to be diving fully into the prescriptive sales method. I did cover a portion of it in CanFit, aka how to be able to actually ask for the sale and how to go through. However, there is more into the prescriptive process, so we're going to go through that. In terms of who I am, so I'm Coach Andrew. You can call me your business wizard for today. I didn't have the opportunity to, of course, show some slides and introduce myself at CanFit, but I am the former owner of Fit for All Fitness Inc. So Fit for All Fitness Inc. was a facility in Oakville, Mississauga, for those of you who are in Toronto, where we served 4,400 clients over the span of 8 years. Portion of that 2 years was online, where we saw some pretty significant growth. And then I had a business exit. And for those of you in the business world, that means you sell your business. That's, of course, a possibility and a potential of having a physical facility. But since then, we've opened up C2C systems, in which case we help health practitioners and fitness business owners grow and scale their business. Outside of that, I do a lot of speaking. So you might be familiar with me in terms of TEDx speaking. I speak for a lot of corporations and companies as well, too. So sales is something that I'm very familiar with because you spend the majority of your life selling. You're either selling your partner on a conversation of where to take them out for dinner, you're selling people on whether or not they should work with you in terms of your business or your service, or you're just selling people on even your ideas in terms of speaking and being a thought leader. So we're going to get into some fun stuff. I'd love for you guys to drop in the chat where you're joining me from. And if you're, of course, listening to the recording, well, then you guys will have the fine pleasure of being able to just say this good stuff in your head. So maybe you saw me at CanFit. Maybe you're a current client. Maybe you found me through social or through content. We've got a lot of people from the recording now, actually from Insta. So good old CanFit. Nice. Excellent. Mr. FP hopping in from CanFit as well too, which is fun. So excellent. We got some good people, some good info that's going to be shared. Today, we're going to go deeper in on a couple of things. I talked at CanFit Pro about solution-aware clients, so the clients who's actually going to be self-led and ready to be able to move forward, the consultation process, and then the 7 stages of the prescriptive method. One thing that I want to showcase is that lovely wizard on the side of the screen here, little corner. That's Tracks the Wizard. If you ever see a slide with Tracks, that's one that you should screenshot and one that you should keep. It's probably one of the most important information. Tracks is our internal little AI tracking dummy, in which he is actually on our C2C Tracks the Wizard platform, in which we have an internal platform where our business owners will go and track all of their metrics and numbers, and then he spits out all of the information. So he's a lot older than I am, but definitely still a stud. If you see him on those slides, make sure, of course, you take a picture of that as we go through. So let's hop into this fun, fantastic adventure. I want to talk about sales calls and sales in general. The majority of the process is pre-qualification. It's setting up via content to make sure that this person is going to be the right fit. However, you then go into the consultation, and when I'm listening to a lot of consult recordings, this is one of the things we do inside of coach-to-coach systems. We'll actually take the time to listen to like how the sales conversations are going. I find that there's 2 mistakes that people will make. The first is they're too conversational. Everything is all about being friend. It's all about being just a great buddy. We're sharing great stories. It's a lot of laughs. But then when you have a conversation that's really just not focused on like, hey, here's the objective, no actual decision is made. And so what happens is these guys are like, oh man, great conversation, awesome, I'll get back to you. And that just doesn't go anywhere. Or the second, it's too salesy. From the beginning all the way to the end, I can basically hear a person trying to push someone to be able to make the sale. And the tough part about that is if it's tough to listen to, it's also tough for someone to swallow too. So if it's filled with too much pitching and pressure, you're either going to get a lot of objections, or you're going to have someone who will tell you, I need to think about it, but really energetically they're saying, hey, it's not for me. Either one of those situations, neither of them is a consultation. That's basically, you're just having this conversation for a specific objective. The goal of consultation and the purpose is really 4 pieces. It's for you to be able to understand their situation, what is bringing them here in the first place, why they're reaching out to you, for you to diagnose the core issue, preventing them from seeing the results, for you to then make a recommendation for them to start, and then for you to help them decide. That is the only purpose of a consultation. Now, when I use the word consultation in this training, I want you to know that a consultation can be done in person. A consultation can be done via Zoom, like what you're going to be watching here, either live or the recording. A consultation can be done in the DMs. Regardless of how you go through, that 4-step process does not change. You have to understand their situation, you got to diagnose what's going on, and then that allows you to prescribe and help them to decide. So your actual job inside of a consult is just to determine what is the best next step for this person. Where a lot of people will start to gravitate to, especially if they're looking to build like a consistent sales process, is they're looking to simply push for a sale. They go into a conversation and they say, hey, I've got 2 options. I want to push someone into this option. That's not diagnosing. That's not prescribing. You're basically coming in and you've got your own agenda. We need to take that away from sales. So, little bit of a CanFit recap. I talked about it starting much earlier, the marketing that attracts it. We're going to go deeper into that today. And the prospects understanding what your process is before they speak with you. If you guys are running a company as a brand, or you're even running a solo brand, every person that should be sitting in front of your consultation should be aware of 3 things. The first is they should be aware of the type of service you provide. Notice I'm not saying who you are, because that doesn't necessarily matter. They need to understand the type of service that you provide. They need to know that you can deliver the results that you say that you can deliver. And they also need to have a small understanding, very small understanding of what your process looks like. Sometimes that's an assumed understanding, aka personal training. People know enough to say, there's going to be activity, there's going to be sessions, you're going to make me sweat. If they don't understand those 3 things, they shouldn't go to the consult whatsoever. Okay. And that really determines whether or not they should have been booked in the first place. So we're going to go deeper into this layer here. So who is your marketing speaking to? Situation aware, problem aware, and solution aware. We talked about being situation aware if something isn't right. They're not really familiar with kind of what's going on. There's not a full issue. Problem aware, they're actually starting to see it as something that's a challenge in their life. And a solution aware person who's actively diving in. This is where we take this to a deeper level. In every high ticket offer or every service structure where you've got multiple offers, you should actually have a way to serve all 3 people. So the first person, the situation aware person, the person is really just investigating. A situation buyer is really asking what's going on with me. So inside of your funnel, your nurture funnel, inside of your funnel of your ads and your marketing, or even your organic content that you're putting, you're technically going to have people in all 3 stages, and they're going to be moving through the next stage. For a person who's situation aware, this is where we can create masterclasses, we can create PDFs, we can create seminars, educating on what's going on with them, helping them recognize where the problems are coming from, helping them recognize if it's even an issue that they have to be dealing with. And the entire goal of being able to present something to a situation aware person is to get them to understand that this is a problem. Any type of content or any type of offer that is given to a situation aware person should be free, because they are not in a space where a financial investment is going to make sense. All they need is really information. When we are looking at the problem aware people inside of our funnels, we're looking to the person who already has the information, but now they're trying to ask a different question. How do I fix this? In which case, this is where things like small challenges, small trials, or initial transformation programs is really relevant, because it gives them the understanding and the recognition of like, oh, this is what I've been missing this whole time. A lot of the people who are problem aware may not recognize that they need a coach, but they do know that they need some form of help. So anytime we're going through this process, this is really great, like especially like a 30-day or a 60-day transformation program is really great to help them go into a further step where they're now invested in the transformation. Now, a solution-aware person, the solution-aware person is the only person you should be speaking to in content. Situation-aware, problem-aware, you can do it in marketing, you can do it in emails and nurture sequences, but solution-aware is the only person you should be speaking to in content. And the reason why is because content has such a large conversion window. Usually, if someone is looking in terms of social media messaging, they're going to be looking from 11 to 14 posts, and they're going to be following you for an average of 3.5 months to 6 months. The way we shorten that window is we speak to the person who's already ready. If you want someone to look at your stuff for around the 3.5 month range, you only can be speaking to the solution aware person. Because if you're speaking to someone situation aware, you're going to have to educate them. Hey, this is what's going on. That might take a month or two. And then they're also going to have to start saying to themselves, well, is the problem worth fixing? Should I invest in it? Then they start asking how. By the time they go through that process, you're looking into, well, a better part of a year. I share this because if you're going to get people into a consultation process, that person has to understand at a fundamental level those 3 things that I shared previous, like a little bit of who you are, the process, and they have to already be invested in a transformation. Those are the only people who are going to be willing to invest at any level and invest high ticket. So the bigger the commitment, the more aware that person needs to be. And this is why we speak to solution aware people. You will get 5 levels of commitment factors that will end up becoming your 5 main objections that you receive in a consultation. So the first is if someone is at a space where they're ready for a transformation, there's going to be a time investment. For sure. They're going to know that they're going to have to take 3 months or 4 months or sometimes 6 to 8 months to be able to make that change. They know that they're going to have to focus and actually be intentional with their journey, and that they're going to have to give energy to it. They know, of course, they're going to have to give some financial capital. Look, they got to put some skin in the game to hire and work with a coach. There's going to be frequency that's involved. And guess what? You, depending on your type of coaching, might be this type of person who's actually going to be attached at their hip for a really long time. They got to commit to that. And then, of course, there's the length of commitment to themselves. If they've never committed to anything for 4 months or 6 months, they're going to have to swallow and understand and fully say, I'm in to all of those things. That's what's required of a person who's actively looking for a complete transformation. If they are not, and you take that into the consultation, that is going to be where your objections come from. So, for someone to have a complete transformation, your consultation process is not about giving them information. So many people will try to educate or will try to coach. And when you give information on those calls, information is everywhere. People can search it via Google. People can now use chat and Gemini can give some phenomenal plans and starting points for people. But here's the thing. People have information. They're not doing anything with it. And the question is why? So your consultation process needs to focus on getting them committed to the process, helping them understand what the clear direction is of where they need to go, showing them that ongoing support is valuable than hands-on information, and then showing them what hands-on implementation looks like and direct feedback for any of the challenges they have. What I mean by that is if someone's like, oh man, I've been working on this for a long time, but it's been really hard for me to find time in my schedule. They're already inserting excuse here. Now we have to provide direct feedback for that and say, listen, a lot of people say that they're in short of time, but we make time for stuff that's important to us. And this is where now we can help them through their reframe. And then ultimately, this is where we get to showcase our specific expertise by showcasing the process of how we're going to help them. So how do we do that? How do we do that in the content? How do we do that in the consult? We use something that's called client speak. This is where we are speaking using the words that they use. And there's a great example of this. I've seen a lot of specialists in my life because I had hormone issues my entire life. But the main reason why I'm in this industry is because my hormones were a freaking mess. There would be so many specialists that I would sit in front of and they would completely talk over me. It was all medical terms. It was all logical stuff. And I'm sitting there just waiting for them to just tell me that I'm going to be okay or that there's going to be a next step because they didn't know how to speak in a regular word that I was using. That's what we want to use in terms of our marketing. Client speak is how we relate to the person. Coach speak is how we educate the person. So here's the difference. I found out client speak with one of my first clients. I think it was like my fifth or sixth client. She ended up staying for 4.5 years with us. We were doing a personal training session and she was like talking to me about her 7 p.m. kind of experiences. Like every night she's going to bed, then the hot flashes start, then she gets irritable with her hubby. And she was like, man, I don't know what it is, but like every night at 7 p.m. I just get monster pause. And she was referring to menopause. And in that moment, I was like, holy shit, I can't make up those words. That is the words that a person uses to describe their situation. Instead of saying, oh, like your hormones, hot flashes, talking about all those things, she wasn't talking about the medical terms. She was talking about monster pause. And there are so many other verbiages that we can use. And this is where we need to stop talking like a coach and we need to start talking like a person who goes through the process. There are a lot of coaches and health professionals that find this naturally because they go through the process themselves. So for example, if you're a coach who's gone through like a weight loss journey, you know personally the ongoing struggles of like, man, like my struggle to look at the pantry and not want to rate it was real when I was losing my first 15 pounds. That's the type of verbiage we want to go to. So a coach, if someone is disconnected with language, a coach will say something like, oh, do you struggle with your relationship with food inside of their content? When really, what they need to be saying is, do you find that you keep standing in front of the pantry at 7 to 8 p.m.? A coach will use in their marketing and in their landing pages that you're struggling with consistency. You have a hard time with accountability. People don't use consistency and accountability. What they're going to say is, hey, I do great for 2 weeks, and then somehow I stop again. We need to start using the words that they say. And why? It's because it attracts a very different buyer. When you speak like a coach, even though it's technically correct, it's completely forgettable. Because a person is not saying, holy crap, this coach is speaking right to me. Good marketing is marketing where you can see yourself in the position and it happens. So my wife runs a business. It's a binge eating and relationship with food business. And we're still in the industry, which is why like marketing is something we know a shit ton of. One of the things that I always hear from my friends is I got a friend, Anthony, fantastic guy. He's like, I had to unfollow your wife because every time I see one of her videos of her like stepping in front of the fridge, being uncertain, like walking away, but then going back and choosing the crappier item. He's like, it's me. And when I watch 3 or 4 of her videos, he's like, holy shit, I think I have a binge eating problem. That is the type of content we want to be creating, where when we look towards the objections, when we look towards the struggle, and when we look towards the experience, a person needs to be able to replace what you're doing, insert themselves, and say that works. So how can we create relatable content? Not saying like, can't stay consistent with your workouts or you're struggling with your nutrition. Yeah, everybody is. But how about that thing where it's like you show up at the gym and you're there, but you spend 45 minutes out of the 60 on your phone? That's a relatable piece of content. How do we get and create that connection? So the goal is to speak to the solution-aware person. So how do we do that in content? Well, you get really specific. Hey, you've been on your journey for about 1.5 years. You've already lost 25 pounds, and that's a great freaking start. You're training 3 to 4 times a week. You're conscious of what you eat. You've cut back on eating out. You're doing a really great job at saying no to your friends. And you know what? You stopped finishing that bottle of wine with your girls every Friday night. Cool. But last 10 pounds still haven't moved. You've been asking yourself, what the heck am I missing? Every girlfriend, every partner that you're speaking to, they're like, man, like you can't do anything more with your food. Like at this point, you're completely ironed out. So you're not looking for another person to tell you to eat less or exercise more. You're trying to figure out what needs to change when you're already doing the obvious things right. Do you see how that message speaks to a different person? It's not situation aware because this person's already a part of the journey. It's not problem aware because, hey, look, they're already actively losing the weight. They've already recognized what the problem is. This is a solution aware person that's like, look, I'm working on the journey, but now I've hit a plateau. The money is in the breakthrough, not in the recognition or in the process. So if we can always position our content to speak to the breakthrough, that's going to be the person that's fired up and ready to buy. So where do we find this client speak? Man, there's tons of places. First, consults. Easy. Use the verbiage and the words that people are actually speaking to you inside of consultations. If you're not recording your consults now, you should be recording all of them, even if you do them in person. One, for quality control. I always recommend all of the businesses we work with do that, but also at the same time, so you can start to see the words that they're describing. When they're talking, the way that they're talking about roles, the way that they're talking about the uncomfortability with their body. So that type of verbiage is the verbiage that you should be using. Second place is DM conversations. Whenever someone writes a comment underneath a post or sends a DM or sends a reply back to your story and goes, oh man, that was so relatable, that was me, you need to be writing down what you said there. Because again, that shows connection. Emails and text threads. Every time a client texts you something or texts you, or whether you're using Telegram or whatever your platform is, Trainerize, doesn't matter. Anytime they're sending a specific set of verbiage, you should be asking them, how are you feeling through this process? Where your sticking points are now? We're asking clients for this because we want communication of what it's like with someone who's actively in it. Notice how whenever you have a bucket ton of clients, you can seem to talk and create content more because you're knowing what verbiage is being used. Client check-ins is good, reviews and surveys as well. Send out a review and ask a specific set of questions. How did you feel through the process? What made you want to start as you went through the process? What changed in terms of your mindset? And then client interviews. Any client who is successful through the process, ask them. Great part. You get a testimonial out of this. You get good client speak content. If you were to speak to someone who's about to start this journey, what would you tell them? And then that same aspect, go through. So this is where we start to find the client speak for that. And look, Tracks the Wizard is there. Maybe that's a photo-worthy one. All right. So the right person is now sitting in front of you. What the hell do you actually say? You've qualified them. You've gotten them with the content. You've changed to actually speak to a more solution-aware person. This is where now we're fully going to go into all 7 of the steps here. So we've got a pre-frame, our discovery, the diagnosis, the prescription, and then there's going to be the alignment, the investment, and the decision. So let's start into the pre-frame. How you start a conversation is how the conversation ends. So it's your job to create the container. Like I said at the very beginning, if you're not intentional with the conversation, 2 things are going to happen. It's a hard pitch or it's a story. So story mode is a person spends 45 minutes plus explaining to you everything that happened in their life and they stay in a victim mindset. Sales mode is basically they're just waiting for you to pitch them and they're going to give you 1 to 2 answers. So your goal is to establish the container and to create the expectations. So here's how you do that. You start a conversation, whether in the DMs or even in a consult, and you say, hey, really appreciate you taking the time to hop on a call. Today, our main focus and objective is to just understand where you're at, where you're trying to get to, and what's been standing in the way. And this, by the way, you can literally use word for word if you want. I'll probably interrupt you on occasion if I want to dig into something deeper or to keep us on track because we've only got 45 minutes. If I believe we can genuinely help, at that point, I'll show you exactly what I'd recommend. And if I don't think we're the right fit, then I'm going to tell you that too. In the end, we're going to figure out what makes sense for your next step. We're going to move forward on it. A yes is great and no is okay. Why do I say the last line there? Because there's going to be a decision at the end of this. And you're okay to tell them, I need a decision from you. You don't have to use this verbatim, but the conversation is like this. Look, we're going to start the conversation, and during the conversation, my sole goal is to figure out what's going on and where we can support you. At that point, I'm going to make a recommendation that I believe is the best fit. Now, because I'm a coach, I'm going to hold you to a high standard. I'm going to ask that you say, yes, this is for me. I'm all in. Amazing. Or no, it's not. And if it's not, totally cool. But either way, you're going to leave with a decision of what you're going to do moving forward. Perfect. We've now set the stage of what this conversation is. We've asked for permission to, if we're getting off track, interrupt and say, hey, listen, we've only got 45 minutes. I don't want to hear the rest of the story. And you'll have full permission to be able to do that, to lock it in. So now we're going to go into the discovery phase. The whole purpose of discovery is to understand the gap. That's it. Not the current situation, not the desired situation. You're going to hear those things through the process. The whole thing is about the gap. What is stopping them? Because that's going to be the roadblock that turns into a future objection. If I only say where they are now and where they want to go, but they never tell me why the heck they're still stuck in the same loop, I'm then going to go into the bonus round of objection handling, trying to figure out where this friction point is. So we're here to understand. Yes, we need all three, but the gap is the most part to understand where we do that. So how do we do that? There's a discovery map that we use in all consultations. So what's happening now? Very simple. What brought you in today? Why are you here? The desired situation. Okay, I really appreciate you sharing that to me. What do you actually want? What does success look like to you through this process? Now they start telling you, hey, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's the goals. Here's the dreams. Cool. How many times have you tried this? We do this to see, of course, someone's consistency, but also to help frame to them why this gap is such a challenge. And now we go into the gap. Why hasn't it worked? And then this is where they're going to tell you, well, the nutrition was very strict. It was a very difficult time in terms of the training. I don't think I had the right coach or the mentor. And then this is where then we start talking about the consequences. So you've told me that this has been happening for 3 years. What's this prevented you from being able to do? What have you not been able to take on? What types of clothes have you not been able to wear? Where do you feel the shame, the guilt? This frames what's costing them. And then the urgency, understanding why now. Why does it matter now? These are the only things you need to cover inside of a consultation. And this process takes 20 minutes. That's it. Any longer, and you're just asking questions because you're trying to create more urgency with this person. If the person is qualified, you only need to know enough to get the context to move forward. The majority of this time needs to be spent on the gap and consequences. Because a lot of people, especially what I would consider lifetime strugglers, a lot of people get into this position where it's like, look, this is just who I am. And we really need to know if we can break that down before we start going into doing the pitch and the promotion. So the favorite questions through discovery to prevent you from coaching are what, where, why, and how. That's it. So what brought you in today? Why do you think this hasn't worked? Where are you currently getting stuck? And how is this affecting you? Those are my 4 go-to questions in every conversation, not just in every consultation. If a client is stuck, you ask these 4. If a person is not seeing results, this is where you go to. Same thing in a consult. If a person is sitting down in front of you, you need to know enough, and this is exactly what you do. So there's a discovery rule that I want you to keep. Always. Don't coach. A consultation is not where you teach. It's not where you give strategies. It's not where you solve people's problems. Because here's the issue with coaching. There's nothing genuinely wrong with coaching. But if someone gets a little bit of a tidbit, they feel like a coaching high, like your energy of being around them, and they say, you know what, I think I'm good to go. And then they'll be good for another week, and then they'll come back to you in 6 months. We're not here to give someone false hope. We need to gather enough information for them to be able to do that. The issue I find is not that coaches immediately go to coaching, but it's that clients start asking for coaching and then coaches respond as a coach. Just like we don't coach from the beginning. If someone goes, well, what do you think I should change with my food? That is going to force and prompt a coaching response out of you. And it's going to say, well, at this point, I don't think you need more information with your food. Why don't we figure out what's going on so then we can make nutrition actually make sense for you? Always go back into the discovery, because the discovery is where people are then going to make that position. So the diagnosis part. Discovery is all about what did they tell me. Diagnosing is completely different. We have to separate what they told me from what's actually keeping them stuck. A show of hands, how many people have sat on a consultation and then someone told you something like, oh, I wish I just had the time. And then you were like, this is not a time issue. And a thing went off in your head. This is not a time issue. But you never said that to the client. So they're going to tell you what they think they need. It's your job to showcase them what they actually need. Great example of this, Henry Ford, the guy who created, of course, not Henry Ford, my God, I'm mixing it with, I was watching Indiana Jones. Very, very funny, Henry Ford. Again, Henry Harrison Ford. So the guy who created the Ford car company, in the beginning, when people are like, what made you create the car? He was like, I created cars and I didn't ask people if they needed cars, because if I were to ask my clients, what do you need for better transportation? They would have said faster horses, because that's what they knew. And so you have to help them understand, hey, this is not what the actual issue is. So it's all about what the discovery reveal. Anytime a client says, I need something, like I feel like I just need this, that is your main anchor for you to reframe for them. Listen to the word need. I feel like I just need to stay motivated. I feel like I just need accountability. Oh man, if I could just get a realistic nutrition plan. I feel like I just need a couple of tips. Anything that comes from need is someone making an assumption that that's what actually is the issue. So using the example here of like, I just need a realistic nutrition plan. No, like in reality, you didn't plan your week. You didn't make good food decisions. You're constantly caught without prepared food. So you don't need another meal plan. You actually need some more work on habit building for you to actually make this nutrition plan work. So your job in the diagnostic is whenever something comes up out of need, you need to reframe it as to what the problem actually is. Why do we do that? We do that so someone stops being in the mode of victim and someone starts taking genuine accountability. If someone struggles with food, and they're like, oh man, I'm really like having a hard time with this. I just can't seem to have time in my schedule and stuff. Be upfront. Based on what you shared, I'm not convinced the issue is actually knowing what to eat. This seems like you're not taking the time to do the meal prep, and there's a barrier there to work on that. When we frame the recognition, this now puts you as the authority. If you were to sit in a doctor's office and you start saying, oh, I'm going to go on this diet and do this, and the doctor goes, yeah, another diet's not what you need. Give me a second here. This is where now you start listening. So other great examples here. Sounds like you know what to do, but nothing in your week makes doing it easy. The goal is to get someone to say yes, right? You're constantly reacting instead of having a structure. Now we've revealed the core problem. So we reveal the core problems because the core problems are what we're going to use in the prescription. When we prescribe our offers to someone, we're not going to give them a full pricing sheet or showcase, here's everything that's involved in the program. Your program, 3 sentences. If you can't get how you're going to help them out in 3 sentences, it's too much. They can't absorb it. So let's say someone comes in and they're struggling with weight loss. They're looking to lose the last 10 pounds and they're having a hard time staying on their nutrition plan. They're having a hard time they're saying that they want accountability. You said, look, it's not accountability. It's really just schedulability issue. So when you explain the program, you have to bring that up. So, hey, Sandra, test client A, based on what you shared, here's what I believe is going to help you and here's what you need. You're going to be working with us for the next 6 months. What we're going to do is we're going to work towards your schedule to make sure that it's simple and easy for you to schedule the training in. You're going to show up 2 times a week. We can do a 3rd time a week once you're getting back into the routine and you're consistent. And when it comes to the nutrition, we'll put together a game plan for you that allows you to prep in less than 90 minutes a week. With that aspect, you're going to lose an average of 2.2 to 2.3 pounds a week, and we're going to get you to your goal over the span of the 6 months. That, not you get 2 calls a week with me and 15 things of this. And then also you get access to these course codes and these modules, because none of that actually matters. You're going to explain that on the orientation. Here's how the process is going to work, but you can't read the menu to them because they have to paint the picture of the process inside of that. If they can't see themselves in the process, or if you give too much information, they're going to be like, oh, I tried that already, or like, I feel very overwhelmed. So it's not going to sound like a menu list. You're going to showcase them. So we prescribe and we're going to do that. And then it ends up being the logical answer to the conversation. So once we've done that pitch, this is where at the end of the prescription, we're going to say what I shared at CanFit. Based on your goals and what you're looking to achieve, I recommend 6 months at 2 times a week or 3 times a week. You can do that monthly at $800 a month, or you can pay in full at $8,000. What option works best for you? So there's a small piece before we go into that, what option works best for you. The piece before that conversation is alignment. And I didn't talk about this because a lot of people go straight into the price because they're like, I just want to hurry up and get this over with. It's really important when we do the prescription that we ask, hey, does this feel like it's going to solve the things you came in wanting help with? How do you feel hearing about the process? Can you see yourself succeeding in this process? We ask that because if they don't believe the prescription fits, the price is going to be useless. Here's a great example. Let's say I show up to a naturopath, and a naturopath is going to be like, we're going to do this, we're going to put you on 15 different supplements, and you're going to be on a 17 pills an hour, and you're saying to yourself, no, I'm not taking that many pills. You already know the moment they tell the process if you're in or not. And if they just make the assumption and say, want to join, you're going to be like, I don't want to join, because there's no opportunity to clarify. But if the naturopath takes a second and say, hey, does this feel like you came and solved everything that you came in wanting help with? This is where now the person has the opportunity to say, to be honest with you, I am concerned about the amount of supplements. Or, you know what, when you say 6 months, I am worried because honestly, like, I haven't even committed 2 months to myself. Like, how the hell am I going to do 6 if I can't even survive 2? People are then going to present to you what the potential objection is going to be. Great. This is where now we can go through and we can actually start to help educate them on that. So the education on the alignment is not something that's crazy. It's basically like, okay, I totally understand where you're coming from, that you're concerned about the time frame. We recommend timeframes based on what's going to get you to your end result, but you're not committing to all 6 months. We're taking this week by week. This 6-month journey and this process that's here, we're going to get you to the end. There's no sweat about that. The process and the steps we'll do are going to be week by week, in which case a person goes, oh, okay, I can see that. Like, yes, it's a 6-month commitment, but I'm focused on a week-to-week journey. I can survive week to week. So we have to get the alignment, and then we go into the investment piece. We say that based on this, the investment works best for you. Now, when we share the investment, this is where we have to stop talking. So many people within a 10 or 15 second range then start adding in other things or explaining in more stuff, not leaving someone the time and process to think. A crazy part of this, man, 5.5 minutes. One of my coaches, I was so proud of him. 5.5 minutes of dead silence, 2 people staring at each other, and I thought the room was going to explode. And then the guy goes, frig, man, I mean, I got to take the next step. And he just needed the space to process. No nothing, no awkward on the phone. The 2 of them just sat there and let the guy digest. Such bravery. This process will never, it won't ever usually last 5 minutes, okay? But it could last 30 seconds or 45 seconds. And the person is looking in their image, they're imagining the process and what it's like to go through it. And then they're recognizing and seeing themselves in it. They're breaking down the financial investment. And then that's when they're going to say basically 3 things. They're going to say, yes, let's do it. They're going to say, no, I'm not in. Or this is where you're going to get an objection. Now, before we go into the decision step, I want to go into this price playbook trap. A lot of times when people pre-qualify, they give a range to their clients. And they say something like, our programs range as low as $200 a month upwards of $800 a month. And when they give them the range, then they pitch the highest portion of the range all the time. Folks, that's not a range. If you are giving a range just because you're uncomfortable saying the highest version of the price or the price that wasn't a real range. The goal of giving someone a range is for you to be able to recommend different options based on what someone needs, aka 2, 3, or 4 times a week. You can ethically promote each one of them. If every single time your consultation is top end of the range, that's a pricing issue. And you need to become comfortable either shifting your range if people are wanting to fall within that middle. Because again, a transparent pathway is you're telling them ethically what the price is. So the decision step, we're not looking to ask them, what do they think? What are your thoughts? What are you feeling right now? The whole reason for silence is for them to be able to create a clear boundary. The best answers you can get are yes or no. And guess what? As a business coach, I get no all the time. No, it doesn't make sense for our business right now. Amazing. Totally fine. Let's reconnect in 6 months and see if it changes. Or no, you seem to be very hands-on. We're kind of looking for someone internal in-house. Perfect. Not a problem. There's no issues with that. Because a clear no means that that person is broken down in their mind. I actually know what my next step is. The worst thing that you can get is an unresolved objection. That's where it really becomes a very uncomfortable problem. Okay. So tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to go into. We're going to go into solely objections without the BS. Obviously, we covered the full process through here. I will say when it comes to objections, the majority of coaches, so let me say this. So average lead to consult rate should be between 22 to 25% of your leads go to a consult. That includes the qualification. So from lead to consultation, 25% of your leads go through. Your closing rate as a coach from anywhere from $300 a month to $880 a month should be averaging 45 to 65% of a close rate. So you will still get objections. Industry standard hovers around 45, but what changes it is basically the pre-qual process. So we still, of course, have to know how to be able to handle objections. But the real thing with objections is really discovering as they go through the process, like what objections keep coming up. Because that's going to be the stuff that I need to be able to either learn how to de-escalate or I've got to start making content on, right? Like if everyone's like, I need to think about it. Okay, cool. What do I need to change inside the process to do that? So tomorrow, that's what we'll be covering, how to handle the pivot with absolute precision. So we'll talk about de-escalation because there's something that's called defensive friction. We'll talk about separating polite delays where someone is just thinking that they have more time than they have and helping people to guide to make some pressure. Before we get into questions, because I want to leave the time to answer some questions as well too, I want to share a really awesome program that we have starting September 14th. And it's literally to help install this process inside of your business. A lot of business owners focus on, in my opinion, a lot of nonsense stuff where they're trying to create a lot of back-end systems when in reality it's like, hey, how do we be able to just streamline and bolt on a process to allow you to focus on other stuff? So we've got a program that's going to be running that's called No BS Sales. And effectively, we're going to be running through the entire process from what happens when this person is a lead, what do we need to make them a qualified person, what do we need to do in terms of forward or lead flow to create a pre-consultation process, what happens during the consultation, so creating your own slide deck and your own process, decision-making loops that will help you, of course, practice and train, and then follow-up sequences so that way you can keep this person engaged. That's the entire process of the program. Creating a start to finish system that you can have either yourself do or your team do in the future that you can be able to hand off with. So we're actually building a shit ton of stuff with this, and we're launching this program because a lot of our clients and team members have been asking for something that they can effectively give to another person. Whether you are a solopreneur and you're like, look, I'm selling it on my own, or you're someone who's got a team and eventually you're going to have other people sell, you still need to have a sales funnel process because that's what makes sales repeatable. So we're going through 2 completely different areas. The first is the conversion pipeline. That's going to be everything from cleaning up your offer and your pricing, your sales funnel, top to bottom, sales scorecard, what you're going to be tracking to make sure that your sales are improving, pre-qual process, consult buy-in, booking reminders, discovery questions. the entire pipeline is being covered, and then you're going to have the back-end SOPs that's going to make your systems better, and that's going to allow you to actually pass it to a person. So your own prescriptive consultation deck, your sales deck, any of the pricing and the options deck, so that way you or a team gets really familiar with it, your follow-up system, and then all of the track-ins for the process. So the goal at the end of the 8 weeks is you're going to have something built, practiced, and ready to use. And then we're also going to have calls that go through the process as well too. So the 8 weeks is very intensive. So we're going to have 2 calls a week, where effectively our first call is just education. Let's get you to build this stuff out along the way. And then the second call is solely going to be overviewing sales and answering questions on any of the sales process. So at the end of the 8 weeks, you've got your sales system built, you're really clear on the offer, and you're confident being able to fully run it. Right now, we've got a special cohort rate for it that's going to be at $12.99 or 2 payments of $7.49. Regular for the program is $2,400. So the rate's going to be ending in September 1st. We've got a bunch of people that are already signed up and registered for it, and we're capping at 30 spots for the program. So through the process, you're going to be getting 8 weekly trainings, 8 No BS Sales Labs. So that's basically 2 calls a week. And then the cool thing about this as well too is we've had a lot of requests to have salespersons join. So we actually are going to be opening up the ticket. The $12.99 includes up to 3 people from your company. So enrollment is now officially open for this fun stuff. I wanted to share this with you guys before, of course, we open into some questions. What do you know? Of course, good old Trax the Wizard is on this slide as well too. And I will drop this in the chat. But at this point, I'm going to open up the floor to a bunch of fun questions.